Joint Chiefs Chairman Mark Milley is looking very closely at whether China may attack Taiwan. Milley telling the BBC that an invasion is not imminent. But he did add that the U.S. is monitoring the situation. Recently, Taiwan scrambled combat aircrafts when Chinese jets were flying in Taiwan's air defense zone. This was China's third largest incursion since the beginning of the year. Milley also noted that a decision to attack Taiwan by Beijing would be a political choice. Now, note, last August, Milley spoke about the rapid collapse of the Afghanistan army following the U.S. troop pullout. Milley said then there was nothing he saw indicating the collapse would take only 11 days. And the Biden administration may soon roll back Trump administration tariffs on select Chinese imports. This weekend, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen held a video call with China's vice premier. The main topic? The economic policies between the two nations and about stabilizing global supply chains. Chinese officials said U.S. tariffs and sanctions were also discussed, but U.S. officials would not confirm that. Both countries agreed that the global economy is facing, quote, grim challenges. I'm joined by Michael Pillsbury. Mr. Pillsbury, nice to talk to you. And tell me, who do these tariffs currently help and who do they hurt?
Well, the tariffs were designed, Greta, with a specific purpose in mind, to punish China for all the technology theft that it's engaged in over the last 20 or 30 years. So this was something President Trump did when China reneged on about a quarter of the trade agreement that they'd agreed to. And he very quickly, within 24 hours, slapped on these very high tariffs on about $300 billion of Chinese imports. But as I say, the purpose was a kind of punishment to get China to reform and also to sign the final phase one agreement, which they did. The problem now, as you know, is the Biden administration is having trouble getting China to agree to the terms of the agreement that Trump nailed, in part, I think, because the Biden team is not seen as very scary or credible in Beijing. They're seen as sort of all talk and no action. We saw something recently just when the Secretary of Defense was in Singapore. He announced we're going to restart our exchange program with the Chinese military. So the Biden team is looking more and more conciliatory, and I'm not sure that's the best way to deal with Beijing.
Wait, is the idea that the Biden administration looks for is that it will ease inflation and probably boost growth to lift some of those tariffs? That's the first part of my question. And the second is, if the tariffs were initially designed to punish, have they been sufficiently punished, or are we doing this because we're in a really bad situation?
Well, the first part of your question, Janet Yellen has already explained that this is not, and her staff, this is not a panacea. It might help a little bit. They've got a Hudson Institute study saying that inflation could drop by 1% from, say, 8.5 to 7.5 if most of the Chinese tariffs were dropped. There's no real reason to believe that's the case. But the second part of their problem, as I say, is leverage. Can the Biden administration get results from China? There was an enforcement system that Bob Lighthizer built in to the phase one deal. The enforcement system has not met yet. The Chinese are refusing to attend. So when American companies have complaints, the mechanism that took 2 years to negotiate now is not being implemented by China, nor have they made the purchases they promised to make, a great increase in purchases from the U.S. So we're looking at a fairly flagrant violation by China, which you would think would demand additional punishment. You wouldn't think it would be a cause for reducing our leverage. That's what worries me, Greta.
All right, so the question, so the global question, is it worth the 1% relief inflation going from 8.5 to 7.5? That's the first question. The second one is if the Biden administration were to consider what you say and increase the tariffs, would that essentially escalate our inflation?
Well, when you talk to economists in detail, they're very famous, as you know, Greta, for on the one hand, on the other hand. I don't put much stock in this calculation of 1% inflation reduction by reducing some tariffs. There are products the Chinese could help us with, but they don't export them. If they sold us a massive amount of oil and natural gas, sure, that would help. But that's not part of what they sell to us. So this could be an illusion that a group within the Biden team it's been known for some months now, wants to restore relations with China and give up the friction and the hostility. This team may be on the winning side, and they're using inflation as their cover for doing this. We may see a general softening of our China policy across the board.
If they do another lockdown for COVID, that will then, of course, eliminates a lot of production. And that, of course, then hits the supply chain, and that makes there's a greater demand for fewer products here in the United States. Is a lockdown not something that we also fear that they do? Although we don't want, however they handle COVID, they brought it to us to begin with, but that's been their strategy recently.
Well, the long-term strategy that President Biden talked about when he first became president, he doesn't want China to surpass America in overall GDP economic strength. That's the same thing President Trump said. It's difficult to tell if the recovery in China, the end of the lockdown in Shanghai, if they're going to be back to growing 2 or 3 times faster than us, in which case they will surpass us. That's really the grand strategy issue that we're all facing. If China has really been damaged, then the chances of their surpassing us in the next 5 to 10 years go way down. That's the issue a lot of people are watching. If we drop the tariffs, it helps China's growth rate, that's for sure. It lets them boost their exports. So that's what I'm worried about, Greta.
Michael Pillsbury, thank you, sir.
Thanks, Greta.